the InfoSec Club for this semester. This will be Advanced Box Breaking with myself, Ejaaz. If you haven't already filled out the attendance, the link is in Stream Chat. It would be really great if you could fill out that attendance. Just a reminder, if you fill out the attendance, that's how you gain voting access in our annual general. We'll start off with just what this workshop will be and what this workshop will not be, just so you can have a more clear idea of what to. And we'll move on to just a basic word of warning, just basic what's in our constitution. We'll jump into a review of basic box breaking with the 4 E's: evaluation, enumeration, exploitation, and escalation. We'll then move on to lateral movements. We'll discuss Linux capabilities and GTFO bins. And then we'll move on to the conclusion. Just a reminder, if at any point you have any questions, feel free to either type it in chat or unmute yourself and ask.
Sorry, just a quick question before we continue further.
Yeah.
Did I miss the beginner part of web exploitation or something?
The beginner web exploitation's in our YouTube and Twitch. So if you look in the announcements channel, you can find the link there.
All right, got it. Lovely, thanks.
No problem.
You said this was advanced box breaking, which makes you think that it's not the beginner to box breaking. I think this is the advanced path. This is
Correct.
The first. Yeah, this is the first topic on box breaking.
Yeah, so if anyone here is looking for our beginner workshop on web exploits, you would have to go to the YouTube or Twitch. If someone could, I think the link is in announcements, but if someone could post that in stream chat, if one of the execs could do that, please. Okay, so what this lesson is, some strategies, methods, and tools. I will be teaching you some very basic tools such as Nmap and Hydra and John, but I won't get into the very nitty-gritty of it. Those tools will be explained in much more detail through a couple of workshops later in this semester. Like I said, this will include some tools, but I won't go into any details on them, just basic how to run and what they do and what they are used for. And some more general information on box breaking. But more importantly, this workshop will not be a one-size-all-fits solution. You need to remember that every box you see, either fake or real, whether it be in Try Hack Me or Hack the Box, will be totally different. The exploitation will be totally different. But more importantly, this is not a license for evil. We're all adults. Please do not think you're gonna learn how to hack Facebook, and please do not even try. And in all seriousness, if you go against the club's code of conduct, your membership will be revoked, and it is highly possible that legal action could be taken against you, not from us. So over this workshop, you will get root access to the machine. Please do not edit any crucial files, remove any crucial files, or add a bunch of files. You won't need to do any adding or removing of files, so please do not even try. So here, let's move into our first topic, the recap of basics of a box breaking. So we'll start off with the 4 E's: evaluate, enumerate, exploit, and escalate. These are the basic steps that is highly recommended that you should follow when breaking into any box. The first one, evaluate. So the evaluate step is basically the stop, wait a minute step, as I like to call it. Here it's not really needed, but it's really helpful in some cases. So here's where you gather, before you run any of your scans, before you even start breaking in, it's where you gather all information you can. Just try to find stuff like, what is the operating system of the box? What is the name of the box? Sometimes that can be a helpful clue. In some cases, it'll give you a hint as to what exploit method you need to use. The primary goal of this step, get as much information that could be useful as you possibly can. Are there any questions so far? Yes, this will be recorded. It is currently being recorded right now. No problem. Do you have any other questions? Okay, moving on. So the next step is you enumerate. This is your discovery step. This is where you try to find, start actually breaking into the box and try to find information such as where you will run your scans, such as Nmap. You find any services that are up, like or ports that are up, and but more importantly, here's where you try to find any weaknesses the box may have, such as backdoors, CVEs, and your primary goal here is to find an exploit you can use to get a user access. When I say user, it's like you don't have any extra privileges on the machine. It's, for example, when you log into the University of Calgary computers, you are a user on the machine. You can only see the files you create yourself. So Nmap. What is Nmap though? Nmap is basically network map. Here's how to run it. You run nmap tac-sc tac-sv followed by the IP address. The tac-sc flag runs any extra scripts that can be useful to the enumeration. tac-sv shows versions for running services. For example, if there's SSH, it'll show you the SSH version and some common ports that you most likely will find with an nmap scan. Port 21, which is FTP port. It stands for File Transfer Protocol. And you run it using FTP space and then your IP address. Just a note, like FTP does have some weird usage. It's not exactly the same as SSHing. Since it's a file transfer protocol, it's used to transfer files between a remote and local machine. You can use ls, but you can't use cat to read the file. Instead, you will have to use get, which would allow you to transfer the file from the remote machine to your local machine. In that case, you can then cat the file and read its contents. One small note about FTP before I continue is sometimes the ls command won't work right away, in which case you will have to enable passive mode by typing in pass. So the next port you will most likely see when breaking into a box is the SSH port. You can run it using SSH username at the IP address and port 80, the HTTP port. This is just your basic web server, and you can open it in any browser of your choice. So here's where we move on to our first challenge. Your goal here is just to run some basic evaluation and enumeration, and there will be one flag to find. Here's the IP address. Just a note, Nmap will show port 25 as being up, but don't even worry about that. Just so you can safely ignore it. And we will have some execs in the other channels if you have any questions. And if you do have questions, feel free to join those chats or message the chat or unmute yourself.
How do I get flags? I mean, around the scan, I have the report now. What do I do?
So you found a report. Just remember what I've said about the basic common ports you can find up.
Yeah.
And so web server, you can find that if that port is up.
Okay. But the slide says there's a flag along the way. How do I get that flag? Around the scan, I have the
So you basically need to
report.
like look around the open ports and see what you can find.
Okay, got it.
Just a 1 minute warning. I'll be moving on to the demo in about 1 minute. Does anyone think they need maybe like another 1 more minute, so a total of 2 minutes before we move on to the demo? Okay, so we're going to move on to the demo now. Oops. So basically, we run our Nmap scan. We see we have port 21 open, which is our FTP port, port 22, which is our SSH port, port 25, as I said, we can ignore, and port 80, which is our HTTP port. So what I mentioned is there's an FTP port, so let's go on to the web server, see what we can find there. Forgot to copy this. And let's copy that and paste it in. If it'll let me paste. There we go. So we see we have very basic hello world web page and beep boop. Something I always like to check and something I highly recommend you check as well every time you see a web page is checking robots.txt, if I can spell it right. And we see we have a base64 string. We can tell this is base64 because of the equal sign at the end. So we can copy that and we can throw it into one of my favorite tools, and all the execs can vouch that this is also their favorite tool, CyberChef. This is a great tool for when you get like some random encoded string and then you want to decode it. So for example, we know this is base64, so we would find this colon, this icon, drag it over into the recipe, and then we can paste the input in. And we see that we now have a flag as well as the FTP login credentials, which is a mermaid man with the password evil. Just an extra note about CyberChef, if let's say you did not know what this was, we can ask it to do magic. We can drag that there, and we can see we come up with two options. This is base64, and we can just click that, and again we get the same output with the flag, the FTP login credentials. Any questions from that? And that's a good note from said Manticore. If it just because it doesn't have an equal sign at the end doesn't mean it's not base64. Awesome. Let's move on to the other two E's. We have exploit. What is the exploit step? Here is your break and enter step. It's often very difficult to find. In my experience, the exploit is a lot harder than the escalation from the boxes I've done, but this is not always the case. So the great advice I can give for this step is look up versions of softwares. Like I mentioned, the Nmap scan does give versions of the services running. For example, we can see it's HTTP. We were using Nginx 1.18.0. We're using OpenSSH 8.2 P1 and VSFTPD 3.0.3. And also see if any of them are unpatched older versions of softwares, and possibly see if you can find a reverse shell or backdoor into the system. Find a username. That's another key item. And your final goal is to become a user here. But the question is, what do you do if you do happen to find a username? Something I always like to do is run a Hydra scan. A Hydra is basically a password cracker. It brute forces possible passwords. You run it like this: Hydra TACL along with the username, TAC capital P, and then the word list rocku.txt. Rocku.txt is a word list file with a bunch of common passphrases. So for example, if I do cat, oops, let me just zoom in for you guys and myself. Cat. As you can see, it'll just run a bunch of common words and phrases with numbers attached to the bottom, and it's a fairly long list. It'll just basically run all those passwords against the system. Oops, that's supposed to be on the same line, my bad. So it's supposed to be Hydra TACL username, TACP the path, 147 point the box IP, SSH TACV. So TACL specifies you're logging in with that username. TAC capital P represents your file of possible words you want to brute force. TAC capital V is verbose mode, and it shows each attempt. And SSH specifies you're trying to log in with an SSH service. So now going back to our box, we want to try to do some exploitation. And at this point, there'll be two flags to find. And again, just a reminder, please don't add, edit, or remove any files. In fact, I will type that Hydra command into the chat for you guys just so it's easier. going to be moving on to the demo in about 2 minutes, just so everyone is aware. Does anyone need a little more time, or are we good to move on to the demo? Unzipping the GZ file. I'm gonna send you the command right now. Sounds good. I'll give a couple more minutes.
Jazz, I just want to clarify, when you say there's 2 flags along the way, do you mean there's 3 flags total on this challenge?
Yes, there's 3 flags, including the robots flag.
So sorry, does that 3 flags include the 2 from when we started?
You only found 1 earlier, and then 2 right now. So if you found 2 earlier, there should be only 1 right now.
Gotcha, okay.
I'm gonna be moving on to the demo now. Oops. So from the previous step, we found our FTP login credentials, which were Mermaid Man and the password evil, or 3v1ll. So if you remember, I can do FTP along with the IP address to get an FTP access. Something I always like to try first when I see an FTP port open is I try anonymous login. Usually this will show if anonymous login is enabled in the Nmap scan, but I'll show you just in case you do come across it. So and when it asks you for the username, you type in anonymous, and when it asks for the password, you just don't enter anything. And if FTP an anonymous login is enabled, you will be greeted with login successful, which is not the case here. So now let's log in with our actual credentials. Mermaid Man, our password, and we can see login successful, which is what we would have seen if anonymous login was enabled. So as I mentioned, we can see ls, but this won't work since passive mode isn't enabled yet. So we can enter pass. Passive mode is now on. And we can see we have ls. We see 2 files, flag.txt and note.txt. So we can get them using get flag.txt, get note.txt, and we can see that the transfer has completed, which now means they are on our local machine. So we can log out, and now we can cat these files. So we can start off by doing cat flag.txt to get the next flag, which is our Desmond the Moon Bear, and we can also do cat note.txt. So, dear Mermaid Man, I am stuck on the moon and have no idea how I got here. Please help, Desmond. So, big shout out to you or anyone who knows where these references are from. But now we have a username, and just a note, Hydra is case sensitive. So, Desmond is our username, so we can try doing a Hydra scan on this. And as you can see, it is showing each attempt as it goes through. Being a bit slow right now, but we will eventually see our flag. As we are going through, does anyone have any questions as we're waiting for this scan to complete? Did you enter the IP address correctly? Was anyone else getting that same issue? Oh, did I do a thing where I entered the IP address wrong again? Oh, I'm sorry. I entered the IP address wrong again, like a complete doofus. It's actually 147 points. Sorry about that. But now, as you can see, our Hydra scan did complete. It shows host port 22. It's an SSH login. We have our host. We have our login name, and we have our password, cheese. Everyone loves cheese. And so we can now SSH in as Desmond. We enter Desmond's password again, which is cheese. And we are now Desmond. We can see what files he has, and we can cat the flag file to get the next file. Next flag, I like trains. Trains are pretty awesome. And finally, escalation. This is your user. Now what should you do step. Here's where you look for other users on the machine, check if you have any pseudo privileges, check for Linux capabilities you have, and your final goal will become root or system. Any questions so far?
Not a question so much as a comment. Certainly on the free tiers of Hack the Box and Try Hack Me, I wouldn't rush to brute force as your first step. That is not usually the path forward.
Oh, that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, for a lot more advanced machines, it'd be very rare that you do see a brute forceable password. So moving on now, we will talk about lateral movements. So what is this? This is when an attacker can get a hold of one asset within some network. Like for example, we got a hold of the Desmond user, and this asset could be a device, a user, and you can think of it as an initial foothold into the machine. And then you would use this initial foothold to gain further access. And this further access can be another user, another device, etc. So for example, we can consult this diagram. Here is our local machine, and we are moving through the system. Here is possibly Desmond's machine. We move further from user to user until we can get deeper and deeper access in the machine. So lateral movements is very helpful when doing box breaking, especially for more advanced boxes. You'll very well notice that you're the first user you get access as probably won't be able to get escalation as a root to root. So for example, here's your local machine again. We go to user 1, user 2, user 3, and from there we can go to the root user. As you can see, only user 3 has access to the root user. And sometimes this will be case of more for easier boxes, but you will maybe able to get access to user 2 or user 3 right away. But this will not be the case every time, and very rare you'll see that. So why should you use lateral movements in boxes? As I mentioned earlier, you may not have any pseudo privileges. Pseudo privilege is something you can check by running sudo tac-l. It asks for a Desmond password. And as right here, you can see, sorry, user Desmond may not run sudo on the machine. This basically means we don't have any pseudo privileges. So there may be other users with less restrictions, such as they do have pseudo privileges or can see other files that they can use to exploit into root. Some read-write permissions they possibly have. And how can we find these other users? Well, you can check the home directory. So for example, we do cd/home, and we do ls. And as you can see, we have Desmond, Mermaid Man, Oliver, and Sue on this machine. Or another thing we can do is check the etc password file. This is a plaintext file. It stores essential files for login information and contains a list of system accounts giving information for each account on the machine, such as the user ID, the group ID, and the shell, for example. So user output typically has the following format. It has username, password, user ID, group ID, user ID info, the home directory, and the shell. And it'll typically look like this, where each field is separated by a colon. So let's go more into what these fields mean. Username, that's very standard. It's Desmond in this case. It'll just be the username of the user. The password, here is an X. X indicates a hashed password stored in the etc shadow file. This only the root should have access to. And it's almost always hashed. But how can you unhash the password? Well, you can use John. So what is John? It's another password cracker. Is it better than Hydra? Well, John and Hydra are two completely different things. Hydra runs more of a brute force. Well, John, if you get the password hash, you can then use John to decrypt it, as long as the answer is in the word lists file. So for example, the word lists tests these strings. So first it'll try hello, then maybe eventually try hello again, but instead of an E, it's a 3, and it'll try H31100. So here's how you can run it. You do John tac word list, and then supply the path to the word list, and then the text file, where the text file contains the hash you found. Now continuing on, we have the user ID in this field, the third field. Here it's 1002. Every user will have a unique user ID except for root, where root, which is used to identify user permissions, such as which files they can see and can't see, where 0 indicates a root user, 1 to 99 are reserved for other predefined accounts, 199 represent admin and system accounts. The group ID, 0 again indicates a root group, and these are again used to store permissions for group users. Then we have the Uid Info right here. As we can see, this is an optional field. Here it is blank. This is a comment field. It can contain additional information about the user. The home directory, which is this field. It basically the path where the user is upon login. So if we press again, example, if we press CD again, we're in our home directory. And if we enter PWD, which stands for present working directory, we see we are home Desmond, which is the same output as the etc password file. And this is where the users own all the files the user owns. That's where you can find those files. And finally, the shell. This is the shell the user has upon login. Here we have a bash shell. Sometimes we may even have an sh shell. But here we have a bash shell. And it's typically bin/bash. So how can you switch users? So the harder way is just to start a new SSH command using SSH, the new username at the IP address. Or the easier way you can do it is using the su command. The su command stands for switch user. It's a fast way of swapping users. You can just do su space username, and then once you're prompted to, enter the password you found for the user. So basic recap. Start by running sudo tac-l, see if you have any sudo permissions. That's the first thing I recommend you do every time you get access to a new user. Look for other users on the machine, see if anyone is out there. And I like to think of this step as more enumeration. You're basically seeing what files you have access to, what users you can find on the machine, etc. So it's time to play some more. Let's go back to our box. I'll enter the correct IP address this time in the chat if anyone still needs it. And your goal here, sorry, not the final goal, but is to switch from Desmond to Oliver. As we saw earlier, Oliver is another user on the machine. So that's your goal here. And once you get into Oliver, you can see one more flag there. Any questions? Feel free to type them in chat or just unmute yourself. Also, just a reminder to DM your flags to Orchid if you want the super cool fake internet points. So it's been about 10 minutes now. I'm gonna give you about 5 more minutes unless anyone needs extra time. Is anyone completely lost and would like a hint? Okay, so moving on to the demo for this challenge. So the exploit, if we look in the etc password file, we see that Oliver has his hash stored in here instead of being stored regular where it should be in the etc shadow file. And then we can use John, as I showed earlier, to decrypt and log in to Oliver. So let me log in again. They keep logging out every 2 minutes. So if we look cat etc password, we can see right here we have John's password between the second and third colon. Sorry, the first and second colon. We copy everything there, and we go to another page. And I've already copied into a Oliver.txt, as you can see here. And then we just run John, as I showed earlier. John tac word list with the path to the word list, and Oliver.txt. This may take a few minutes to run sometimes, but I've already run it in advance. So if you see that, all you have to do is run John tac show, but John is smart and it saves previously known hashes. So just run John tac show Oliver.txt, and we get our password. Note to you don't include the question mark and the colon. So our password is H4CK3R or hacker. So we can use the easy way of logging into Oliver as an SU into Oliver. Enter our password, which we found. And we are now Oliver. And we need to go to Oliver's home directory, which we can do using cd, where we are now in /home/Oliver. And we can run ls. We actually see two files, flag.txt. As we can see here, the new flag, why so lateral? I think that's pretty funny. Hope you do too. And we also see a file called root.txt. So why not we just go ahead and open it? But we see permission denied. If we do ls-tac-la, we see that root.txt is owned by root. So in order to read that, we must be a root user. Is there any questions so far? Oh, thanks, Josh. Yeah, the note will be different based on who you are, but it'll still be along the lines of permission denied. So capabilities and GTFO bins, this will be our last topic for the day. So what are GTFO bins? It's a list of Unix binaries and is used to bypass security restrictions. So run sudo tac-l. As we can see again, we're now as a different user, so let's run sudo tac-l again and see what happens. Ask for a password again. And we can see, sorry, user Oliver may not run sudo again. So Oliver also doesn't have any sudo permissions. So if there is some output, then we can check GTFO bins. So we have a small demo here. Here's a website. I'll post the link in chat in a minute. So here's a small demo, just a small note. You will not get any access to this user. This user is purely just to demo GTFO bins. So if I su into su, I'm now su, and if I run sudo tac-l, we can see a different output than what we saw previously. So su may run the following commands on the machine. We can run / as root. We can run user bin vi. So what does that mean though? Here's where we check GTFO bins. If you Google GTFO bins, it'll be the very first link you see. I'll post it in chat. And it's a huge list of files you can use access to. The primary one we want to look at is stuff that gives us shell and sudo access. So we look for shell and we scroll down. We want to find vi because that's what we can run. So here we find vi. And here's the two primary areas we want to look at. We want to look at shell and pseudo. So here for shell, we see it can be used to break out from restricted environments by spawning an interactive system shell. And if the user is allowed to run the command as super user, it does not drop elevated privileges, and you can use it to access the file system, escalate, which is what we want, or maintain privilege access. So this is the command we run. So let's copy it over just to see it in action. Right, here's the command. And we are now root in a shell. So who am I? Root. And that's what you can do with GTFO bins if pseudotacl does ever return output. Let's go back to Oliver. So we're now Oliver. Any questions about GTFO bins? I'm going to assume that's a no and move on. So Linux capabilities. So again, do you guys remember? I talked about this earlier, but who remembers what the UID for root is? Feel free to throw it in chat. What the user ID for root is. Haha. Does anyone else remember what the user ID for root is? You can even unmute
0.
yourself if you want. 0, thank you. So users with that ID can get some special treatment when running processes, such as they can execute specific programs. And capabilities is that's what capabilities does. It gives a subset of privileges to a specific process. And we can see here's the website. This is another great website I would highly recommend you bookmark. If you Google search Linux capabilities, it should be the 4th or 5th one from the top. It's the books.hacktricks. So here I'll throw that in the chat again, that file, that website I mean. Sign of pi. I like that one, Zach. So moving on. But why are the capabilities important? So we are currently Oliver. We are a regular normal user. We don't, as in if you remember when we ran pseudotacl, we weren't allowed to use that. So we can't access files we don't own. So which you remember when we saw root.txt, we cannot cat root.txt again because we don't have the permission to. So doing so requires root privileges, as I also mentioned. So there are 4 different types of capabilities. The first one we will discuss are the processes and binaries capabilities. Process capabilities, they see capabilities for particular processes and execute commands. So you can run cat/proc/ $status and pipe it into grep cap. This will basically search for capabilities in the current process. So if you run that command as cat/proc/ $status, and grep it into cap. Huh? Oh, that's why. There we go. We see 5 different lines. We see cap INH, which returns the inherited capabilities, the cap PRM, which returns permitted capabilities, cap EFF, which returns effective capabilities, the bounding set from cap BND, and ambient capabilities from cap AMB. Binary capabilities, these can be used while executing. So you can execute using the command getcap tac_r /2 greater than /dev/null, and then the tac_r basically instructs it to do a recursive search. And these are all the capabilities the binary has access to, or which is you. So moving on to the second one, we see user capabilities. User capabilities are accessible by specific users. Requires a few files to be configured, as you can see here. Here's a sample output from what user capabilities would return. You have the developer, user 1 has access to this, and then multiple capabilities and capabilities combining names and numerics. This column basically shows which user can access the capability. Moving on, we have environment capabilities. Allow spawning of a bash shell, which is what we would normally want after compiling and running a program. But this would also require certain ambient permissions to be set. Just a note, please do not try this for this box. This is not the exploit we are looking for. So please do not try just to write a bunch of files and execute them on this machine. And finally, service capabilities. Services running as root will have all capabilities assigned. So for non-root user, if you have something running as root, that can lead to a lot of danger since you may be able to access files you're not supposed to access. So the way around this would be to create a service config file where you specify the capabilities you want each user to have and be able to run. Is there any questions before we move on to the last exercise? Wish I could have some Jeopardy music playing in the background while I waited. But it doesn't look like we have any questions. So once again, next exercise, you will get root access. So please do not edit any files, remove any files, or add a bunch of files. Just please, and thank you. So let's get back to our box now. Again, the IP, the goal is to go from Oliver, and from there you should have an access to root. So here there'll be two flags to find. The first one we already saw was in Oliver's home directory, as in root.txt. The second one will be in the path /root/root.txt. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or DM me or just throw it in chat. And happy flag hunting.
Is there a strategy here? I don't think you outlined a strategy to take.
So basically, I've been talking about some capabilities. So look around on the capability side I sent, seeing if you can find anything from there. Does that answer your question?
Assume that that get process one might come back with something interesting.
Mm-hmm. Is this the slide you were looking for, Emily?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Braden. So just a note, if anyone needs a hint or anything, or just wants to work collaboratively, Braden is in the chilling channel. So if you want any help, you can go there. And I will send a message in about when it's about 2 minutes before we come back together. So I just moved back to this current slide, but basically capabilities are used if we can't access files we don't own. Doing so requires root privileges, and that's where capabilities come in because it can be used in some cases to do a privilege exploit to be able to access these files. Just a note, because I'm seeing a lot of people getting this first flag and not the second flag, but there are two flags to find. The one is in Oliver's home directory, and the second one's in the /root/root.txt file. Also, just a 5-minute warning. We're going to be moving on to the conclusion of the workshop in about 5 minutes. Okay, that's it for time. So let's move on to the conclusion of the workshop. So conclusion, again, GTFO bins is a very useful site to check out. I've posted a link in chat. So some resources, again, there's book.hacktricks. This is the site where we saw the Linux capabilities, but it's so much more than that. We can talk all about Linux privilege escalation. There's a bunch of different sections on it. It's a site I highly recommend you check out. As Stead Manticore also said, LinPs is going to be your best friend. This Hacktricks website does go into LinPs in very great detail, something I highly recommend you read. Also, LinPs checklist. The Hacktricks has a LinPs checklist and an explanation of all the checks it does. And the GTFO bins are some great sites I highly recommend you check out. So as I said earlier, what I have shown you today is just a couple of the ways you can attack a box. Every box, again, will be completely different. There are many, many ways you can choose to attack a box. So two great resources, Try Hack Me and Hack the Box. Try Hack Me, if you are completely new, this is the best starting point for you. I highly recommend signing up for Try Hack Me and just trying to do as many rooms as you can. This is really great if you don't have much experience. And some rooms I recommend are Common Linux Privesc methods and the OWASP Top 10, which is top 10 most common vulnerabilities you will see. So Hack the Box. This is slightly more difficult. My recommendation, start with the easy machines. Try the machine on your own first. Stop yourself from reading the write-up until the machine has been retired. The most recent write-up, the most recent machines will be available for a short while for free members. So I highly recommend you, once you do read the write-up, start off by reading the write-up of retired machines. First of all, see how far you got on your own. And that's a great judgment of how you can do and get better and better, and something I did myself. And then what you should do is, from the very beginning, follow along with the write-up and keep going until you, and then once you've gone root on the machine, go to Try Hack Me and practice any new skills that the box required. So again, please fill out the attendance form if you haven't done so already. As I said, the attendance is crucial to you being able to vote in our AGM at the end of the year. And one last announcement is that we are currently looking for junior execs for our club. This is a great extracurricular opportunity. And if you have any questions, we will be holding an information session this coming Wednesday, September the 29th at 6 p.m. in our Discord. So if you have any questions, feel free to come on by to that and learn more about what being a junior exec requires. So thank you for attending the workshop. I hope you learned a lot. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me on Discord or anything. The box will remain up for a little while, so if you did not get the last 2 flags, you can keep trying. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Ejaaz.
Thanks, Ejaaz.
Thanks, Ejaaz.
Thanks.
Thank you.